What's up, peoples? Welcome to our new video for mug number 5. Today we're going to be talking about comma rules again, part 3. So we've gone over the first 8 rules of where and when and why to use commas. We're going to go over 4 more rules today. Remember, you need a fresh sheet of notebook paper out in front of you. Name, date, period in the top right-hand corner. Please remember to include first and last name, as well as the header. Make sure that you fill it in with the full title, Mug 5, Comma Rules Part 3. If you are labeling your mugs with the full title, it will make studying a lot easier for you. Say we have a quiz on comma rules and you have to dig through like 10 different mug pages of notes. It would be helpful to you to have your notes labeled. That way you can jump straight to the commas rather than having to leaf through and reread through a whole bunch of notes to figure out which ones belonged to the commas. All right, without further ado, let's talk about our next 4 rules. So we've already gone over 1 through 8. Here we go with number 9. We use commas to separate equal adjectives. So when we're dealing with 2 adjectives in a row, sometimes we have to use a comma to show their separation. Sometimes there's an obvious order to the 2 adjectives, like Clifford the big red dog. In that case, we do not need to include a comma. But sometimes when we have 2 adjectives that are of equal proportion, we do need to separate them. Those are called equal adjectives. In case you did not know what order adjectives should go in, I've given you right here the adjective order that adjectives are supposed to go in. Osaskamp has to do with opinion, size, age, shape, color, origin, material, and purpose. All adjectives, when being written in a sentence, need to follow this order. So number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Take a look at this first example. She had stunning almond-shaped eyes. So we have 2 adjectives here, stunning and almond-shaped. There is an obvious order to our adjectives in this case, and they are in order, so they do not need to be separated by a comma. But take a look at this one here. My neighbor has a hideous, stinky pet dog. If we can flip the order of these 2 adjectives, has a stinky, hideous pet dog, then yes, we should be actually separating these 2 adjectives with a comma because these are equal adjectives. Sometimes we might use multiple adjectives in our sentence to describe someone or something. And when we're doing that, we have to make sure that we're using commas to separate the list. So here, she was a beautiful, tall, thin, young, black-haired Scottish woman. Not only are all of our adjectives in adjective order according to Osaskamp, but they are also being separated by commas, not because they're equal, but because there's so many. So there's a difference between using commas in a list here versus using commas to separate 2 equal adjectives. We also use commas to set off transitions. We'll talk more about transitions when we get to essays, but just a quick little sneak peek. Anytime we include a transition or start a sentence off with a transition like this, it could be a transitional phrase, it could be just a transitional word. Whatever we're using, we need to set it off with a comma because after the transition is where our sentence really begins. First of all, comma, Miss Ellie's birthday month is September. Nevertheless, comma, autumn is my favorite season. So they're kind of like interruptions, but they are more like transitions than interruptions. They're interrupting with the intent to transfer our line of thinking from one topic to another. Kind of go along with interruptions. We also use commas before and after a phrase or a mini phrase or like a small word that interrupts an independent clause. So we have a full size sentence, but then it's getting interrupted by a mini phrase or a word or two. And those interruptions can include stuff like non-restrictive or non-essential clauses and appositives, but notice compared to rules 4 and 5 how lacking in substance this example here is. So we have the truth, in fact, is even scarier than the stories. So this part, in fact, we have to include a comma before, and my bad, I forgot to highlight this guy, a comma after. Why do we have to do this? This little wording right here is interrupting our independent clause here. The truth is even scarier than the stories. That was our independent clause, but the in fact is interrupting it. So to set off that interruption, we need the comma before and after. But remember, this is very different from a non-restrictive, non-essential clause versus an appositive. If you take a look at those rules and the examples that I gave to you in those in the previous two videos, you will notice that those ones had a lot more context, a lot more substance between the commas than this guy does. And last but not least, we use commas to set off contrasted elements. What I mean by that is contrasted elements show that there is a clear distinction between two halves of a sentence. So, for example, it is my life, not yours. We're breaking up the difference between mine and yours. Your contrasted elements are usually going to begin with those words right there: not, but not, though, or unlike. So keep those in mind to memorize them if you need to. And remember that we use those commas to break up two opposing parts of a sentence. If you have any questions on any four of these comma rules, please do let me know. You can send me a Canvas message, you can text me on Remind, or you can ask me in class. If you get your notes done early, I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions. Last time, we had a question from one of our students, from a couple of our students actually, who wanted to know what is the difference between a non-restrictive and an appositive. So rules number 4 and 5. So I just want to recap this real quick. Non-restrictive and non-essential are essentially the same. These clauses are not going to change or limit the meaning of a sentence and need to have a comma before and after them. So these are the parts of the sentence that are going to start with that, which, or who. Now, sometimes you're going to have parts of a sentence that include the that, which, or who that do not need commas, but more on that later. Particularly the ones, if you know you are using a comma in a sentence, how do you figure out that you're using it because there's a non-restrictive, or how do you know you're using it because there's an appositive? Well, non-restrictives are going to start with these three words, or check out this example. John, who spent the last 3 days fishing, is back on the job again. This middle part of our sentence starts with who, and that is one of our key words here. Appositives are second nouns that clarify the first noun that they follow. So if you take a look at this example, Alexander Pope, the Restoration poet, is famous for his monologues. This right here, Alexander Pope, is noun number 1. The Restoration poet is the second noun number 2. The function of this second noun is to clarify the first one right here. This part gives us more information on this one, more clarity. That is the critical difference between an appositive and a non-restrictive. Yes, we are getting more information in here, who spent the last 3 days fishing, clarifying what John did. But over here, Alexander Pope, the Restoration poet, this part here is just another noun. It's another noun describing the first noun. That's it. So positives are always going to be noun plus noun. Non-restrictives are going to give you a wee bit more detail, a wee bit more information. So if you have any questions on any of these, please do let me know.